keen to hear if there's perhaps one, possibly even two core skills that you've taken from your sporting backgrounds that have helped you in startups. Keen to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure. I come from a family of 5 children, so sports being a huge part of, we could kind of make our own team in any sport between the 5 of us. And so we were all heavily competitive as kids. Sports always been like a huge part of my growing up. When I was a junior, I used to box and held teachers titles, and so it was a big part of my life up until university. And then through university or post-university is when I co-founded the company inexplicably sort of breaking my knee. And right the way through, I think, my entire sporting career, a few things that always stood out to me that I think are what we're doing now is very simply, hard work pays off. Nothing's easy. There's nothing truer than that in sport. And then secondly, building great makes the whole not only perform better, but much more enjoyable.
Fantastic, thank you, Alex. And what about yourself, Lance? I know you mentioned obviously your army background as well. I can only imagine, the kind of discipline, the work ethic required. How's that kind of helped you in your career so far?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Having some mic issues.
No worries.
Yeah, cool. Army-wise, I think in a lot of ways, like the Army resembles what you might see kind of in elite athletics or performance or sports in general. You're generally working on a small team, trying to row in the same boat towards a certain mission, and I think the same things that apply in sports, be it culture, be it work ethic, be it routine, I think apply in the military as well. And so, I grew up playing sports my whole life. Like I said, basketball player. Wanted to be a 6'5" point guard. Unfortunately, only made it to 5'11". But so I wasn't going pro at any time. But ended up playing in college a bit and then into the military. And so it's definitely been a big part, I think, of my life and a lot of stuff that you learn from those experiences, I think, add well or kind of contribute well to kind of what I'm doing now, working with startups and stuff like that. So very relevant, I think, in my opinion. And you're seeing more and more athletes getting involved in this sense with startups, either lending their brand or expertise, or even investing directly. So I think there's a ton of overlap with kind of the mentality and the culture associated with both of those verticals and domains.
Fantastic. No, it's a really good perspective, Hans. No, I think what you said, absolutely spot on. And interested to hear from you, David. So Taekwondo, that's something I didn't actually notice in my prep. So I can only imagine that in a similar sense requires a lot of discipline.
It was a very long time ago. I was between 8 and 17, so it was a very long time ago. I don't speak about it much, to be honest. From 20 onwards, my passion was golf. But I was passionate about all sports, and I competed. Certain Taekwondo I competed at an exceptionally high level, but even school football team, local football teams I was involved in at different times. And look, I think there's loads of parallels between sport and startup and business in general. And certainly when we recruit, we love somebody that comes in with that personality, that desire and drive to really, push something on or move something forward. We talk about moving the needle a lot internally at ShotScope. And, it takes a certain mindset. And one of those things about moving the needle, it's not all about the wins. The wins everybody can see from afar. But sometimes the wins take months, years, multiple years, and in between that, and when you started that, or when you commenced on that journey, you might have had many lows. And I think sports people know that. Sports people, unless you're very, very fortunate, or you have an exceptional gift, and then you still have to work hard. You might be fortunate enough not to have many lows, and it's all just highs. But most sports people have had lows. Sports people have had to work hard and have that determination and that different type of attitude that sometimes you have, and I think that sees you well in startups. I think if you're always moving the needle, always moving it forward, then your startup's going to do well in general.
Very good point, David. No, I love that. And I think what you're saying as well about the wins, I think that's very, very true, isn't it? And I guess perhaps similar, Roy, in terms of archery, I can only imagine that the kind of margin for error is so small, and obviously the kind of differences between placing is so minute as well. What have you taken, Roy, from your kind of archery career, and how do you think that's kind of guided you with PlayerData?
I'm slightly different to the other panelists in that I started university a complete geek, and I never played a sport in my life before, and it was only by chance that I found myself at the Freshers' Fair trying out archery. I fell in love with it, but was crap at it. And when you're crap at archery in Scotland especially, there's nobody that wants to help you to get better. So I had to get a little creative because I really, really enjoyed the sport, and I found that I was competitive and wanted to get better. So I started playing around with sensors and stuck them on body, collected data, wrote algorithms to analyze my own technique, and self-trained myself up for about a year and a half, and did well enough that in that time I went from beginner to competing internationally for Scotland, and then my home country Thailand, and was on track to go to Olympics. Unfortunately didn't get to go to the Olympics because I was in a car accident in the wrong seat, and a can of Coke came out of the boot and hit me in the back of the head.
Wow.
And left me concussed for 3 weeks, so I didn't get to go. I know it sounds absolutely ridiculous, and like every time I tell it, I just go, I just can't believe that's happened. But the biggest takeaway that I had from it actually is sort of, it's given me two big appreciations. One is an appreciation from a complete outsider's perspective of data. And that has allowed me to try things that when you read sports science papers that people just go, that people approach it from a completely different angle. And the second is learning how to fail and being comfortable with failure. Exactly what David said is to be a good athlete. Yeah, you can have all the greatest, all the best data in the world, all the best coaches, but you have to learn how to fail. And what I learned during that time is learn how to fail fast, and always take something from that failure. And that's something I carried on with me to PlayerData.
It's an excellent point, Roy. And actually, I am going to bounce exactly off that point about failure. So one of the questions I was eager to dive into was going on to failure later on. But I think now that you mentioned it, I think, of course, we all know the parallels of sport. And actually, Roy, you mentioned obviously the story about the Coke can. It just shows that no matter how good your preparation is, how good things are going, there's certain things that you just could not possibly obviously predict or avoid. But with that said, so I'll come back to you, Alex, first. Maybe a bit of a quirky question, but I'm hoping this can give us some really good insights about your thinking and obviously how you approach failure. But do you have a favourite failure? Do you have a failure that for you turned out really positive in the end? You maybe learned from it, you maybe grew from it. What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think there's many failures. Like Roy said, like failing to think there's small failures every day, whether that coach might not make the sale or whatever it might be. I think the big sort of learning lesson, though, that I definitely would, I always sort of tell people, because I initially started as a sole founder, and it was about sort of 6 to 10 months in that I actually went and sought co-founders, and I think I think my failure was more in the beginning, which is, failing to recognize that throughout my whole sporting career, even though I was competing in boxing, it was seen as a solo sport, there's still a full team that was around it. And that was what we success. And so I think my failure in the beginning was not to recognize that, building a great team should first do. Because ever since I brought on my 2 co-founders, everything else just started clicking so much better, faster. And the whole journey in itself has, become so much more enjoyable because you get to share it with people, right? And I think to make that as well, to get back to Roy's and David's earlier point, if there's three of you all failing as quickly as possible, you can fail a lot faster and therefore win a lot faster, right? So I think that would be my biggest takeaway, failing to realize that, trying to do this as a solo move for me, and I would always recommend people find co-founders that, complement their skill set.
Absolutely, that's in many parallels, of course, with a team in sport, and like you mentioned, obviously in boxing. I think that's a really good point. Nobody, even in an individual sport, can do it alone. And coming to you, Lance, I guess this might be a slightly different frame of question, but I guess, of course, with the VC model, you could argue in many ways that it is set up to account for, well, more failures than wins, at least from what I understand. But yeah, if we take this kind of same question for you, Lance, are there any failures yourself that you've kind of learned a lot from, that you've actually appreciated happening? What for you comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, lots of failures, I guess. I think, one that has always remained top of mind for me in a learning experience is actually probably more from the military than sport. I mean, I've got a sport one too, but in the military, so I attended a school called Ranger School, which is a 60-day leadership course set up to simulate kind of what it is like in combat. And so they use sleep deprivation, they use food deprivation, and put you in these leadership scenarios, mission to see how you respond. And I don't know, there's a 50% attrition rate. And it's kind of a famed school, and pretty intense. I had the opportunity to go to that, which was awesome. People will do anything for a 50-cent patch that you didn't get to wear on your left shoulder on your uniform to say that you're a graduate of the school. It's kind of crazy what people will do for awards. But I did that, and I passed the school, but every day I think I failed at something. It was pretty pathetic. I was the last one to wake up, the last one to pack my bag. Led the team down the wrong path at one point during a mission. And you just felt like crap every day. And I think the lesson there for me was having to rely, and this goes back to the point of the co-founder that was just made. You can probably do things a lot quicker if you go alone, but the concept of working as a team and building I guess complementary skill sets around you allows you to go much further. And so Ranger School for me and some of the other schools I did in the military was very much a reminder that to be successful in the long term, it's a team effort, knowing that there's going to be failures along the way, but having a great team around you, be it advisors, investors, teammates, and co-founders, I think is really important. Kind of how we think about it as we partner with founders in the space as well. So that's kind of one. I mean, the sports one, I ended up getting hurt in college and had to quit the basketball team. And this sounds pretty hilarious, but I remember walking up to tell the coach that I was quitting, and I couldn't stop bawling because my dream of being a professional athlete kind of went out the door. But it ended up being the right choice. Just a tough one to make at age 20 when for your whole life you thought you'd be in the NBA or playing overseas or something like that.
It's a brilliant point, Lance, and I think something we might come back onto, which is hard choices. And yeah, like you said, for you that was a huge dream, and I can only imagine it must have been very very difficult to make that decision. But hey, it sounds like it's been the right one, like you mentioned, and we'll potentially go back onto that. So what about yourself, David? So I guess if there's any golfers out there, I'm not sure I include myself as a golfer. I don't feel like I'm qualified enough, but with this type of sport, there's a lot of failures. But yeah, what about yourself, I guess, from a kind of personal standpoint? Is anything about it?
Yeah. I mean, we can totally relate to what Lance was talking about there. To achieve anything, to get the win, to move something on. If you're going to start something from scratch, along the way there's going to be lots of failures. There's going to be more failures than there is wins. And we certainly fail every single day. And I encourage it. I'm a bit strange. I think you learn a little bit more from your failures. I think you actually learn a lot more from your failures. They hurt a little bit more. You remember them, and I think you get more from that than you do your wins. Actually, it's one of these things that when you win, sometimes we forget to look under the hood, analyse it, find out why we won. I'm the combination of an engineer, a data guy, and a sports guy that was very analytical driven in every sport I've done. It's an unhealthy combo. It doesn't matter if we win, lose, or draw. I want to get in there and find out why. And that's quite healthy. I encourage that within the culture of the company, because that means we've got a team there that isn't scared to fail. And if they're not scared to fail, it means they will push the boundaries. They'll move products forward. They'll have the next level of ambition to try and go and do something different or change something, rather than kind of leave it as the status quo. So I encourage it. I just always like them to have some logic behind it or some research behind it, just so you've got a reason for sort of the decision you're taking. But I really encourage them to drive everything forward and take those risks so we can achieve the bigger wins at the end. And I think that's really important. Any management team, any founder, you have to trust that team there and give them the opportunity to fail. You need to give them the space and the resources and believe. And if it goes wrong, we can have a look at it afterwards. And it's interesting. I think it's a cultural thing. I think I went a couple of trips over to Silicon Valley, spent a little bit of time, not a lot of time in Silicon Valley, but we went and met a lot of startups. We met some VCs. We met some larger companies, and I mean stock-listed companies. And I could tell in that certain environment and culture, failure was actually quite good. You tried to do something and it failed. Right? Let's you've learned. Let's move on. And I love a bit of that culture in Scotland. And starting from a young age, and I've certainly got a young family now, and I push them all the time to fail and see where they can take it and question things. But yeah, I think in our culture, there's nothing wrong with failure. Even this week, Scotland, I tell you what, that team's moved on leaps and bounds, even though they failed this week. So, maybe we have to learn that failure can be a good thing as well.
Fantastic, so well put, David. And obviously, mentioning culture is just such a huge topic, regardless of industry. So I think we'll potentially come back onto culture. I think there's many quite exciting and powerful parallels with sport again. Obviously thinking about coaches and similar leadership positions. What about yourself, Rory? What comes to mind when I say the word failure? What jumps out?
That's what we do every day. It is the best bit of my job, to be honest. And actually, the bit that we kind of today, I was just thinking back as the other panelists were talking today of what we failed on today, and it was good. I've learned a lot, and tomorrow we'll put in the stuff so that we don't make the same mistakes again. And that's the only way that you can grow. The moment that you stigmatize failure is the moment that you slow any chance of rapid growth. And because things move slower, people are more careful, and what we do on a daily basis at PlayerData is every morning during our stand-ups, we talk about the good things that have happened the previous day and also the failures. And we talk about what we can learn from them. The most important thing is that we learn from them. But I think that the hardest thing, though, is that this isn't. You get a lot of advice to founders and CEOs of companies that you have to be okay with failing, and you have to be self-motivated. You have to be driven. The thing that's not talked a lot is that when you're a young startup, your company needs to do that as well, and then you actually need that type of mentality with your founding team, or when you're small. Companies need to be comfortable with failure. They need to be self-driven, be able to ride the roller coaster, and it's something that we talk about It's a bit of culture fit, but something that we try and talk about little and often at PlayerData.
Fantastic. No, it's 4 incredible answers, and I'm glad I asked it. I'm glad, Boy, you mentioned that in your first response as well. And I just think it's almost like a bit taboo for some people to mention, but what I'm getting from all of you is it's not only not a bad thing, it's actually, you could argue, essential. But let's kind of come back onto a slightly kind of different angle now, and that is hardware. So what I noticed with obviously it's the startups, it's this combination of hardware and software. So obviously, Roy, you've got kind of GPS technology. Obviously, Alex, you've got the kind of hardware of the BFR straps. I'm not sure if that's the right kind of technical term. Alongside the app, obviously. Similar for you, David, with GPS and the actual kind of hardware piece of kit. What I guess I'm really keen to dive into is how have you tackled that? Because for me, it feels like in terms of risk, and I guess if we're talking about failure, there's potentially more if we're thinking about supply chain and the kind of difficulties associated with R&D. What I'll do as well, Lance, is I'll ask you a slightly different question from a VC perspective. One thing I've heard from many founders is, a lot of VCs will say to them, look, in terms of risk assessment, if there's hardware involved, that automatically makes it much harder in terms of investment. I mean, of course, that may be completely wrong, but keen to hear your thoughts. But let's go back in order again. So I'll come to you, Alex, first, and keen to hear a bit of your kind of story with Suji and how you've gone about the hardware route. And as part of this question, I was keen to ask you, was there anything that you weren't expecting in terms of challenges? And obviously that could be hardware, it could be software, it could be both.
Sure. So I think we're a bit of an anomaly because we set up our production during COVID and Brexit, which is honestly the worst time I think anybody could ever set up production ever. Right down to dealing with customs or FedEx or anything like that, just all over the place. So I think there's a bit of a negative against it in terms of it's much harder. But I think in operating in our space where there's almost like a third thing for us now, which we're realizing is there's intent elements. What we do is we're starting to consider ourselves like a hardware, software, and content, right? Not just hardware and software. And I think that's quite exciting because if you look at some of the biggest fitness tech companies, right, you've got Peloton, Mirror, Tonal, you've got Whoop, you've got these, wearable technologies where, the big thing is that they have all 3 integrated in-house, right? They have their hardware, they have their software, their content, which, then is the engaging part that keeps you on the platform. So I think to answer your question, I'm glad we have it all in-house because it means that, if we had any one of it out-house, then we'd be dependent on somebody else's hardware cycle or somebody else's software cycle, which, going back to plays into kind of what the guys have been saying around, stifling growth. So by owning all of that, you're vertically integrated, which means that it's your cycles that drive at which you product out. You own the IP, and ultimately you can test a bunch more things. I think it's difficult. My unexpected challenge certainly was COVID and Brexit and trying to set up a production during both of those. But ultimately, I'm not sad or down that we've got hardware. I'm quite glad that we own it in house.
Fantastic, and I'm glad you mentioned content, Alex. That's something that we'll come on to actually shortly in terms of marketing, and keen to obviously get all 4 of your perspectives on that. Come to you, Lance. So I guess obviously it's a slightly different question, different angle from a VC point of view. I'm not sure how much you're able to share in terms of your portfolio and companies you've invested in as at KB Partners, but how do you approach it? Do you tend to favor one type or the other? Are you kind of more software focused, more hardware? Is it an equal balance? How do you approach this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We definitely have investments in the portfolio that have a hardware software play, and I really like what Alex said. There is some really interesting success stories out there, like a Peloton, where seemingly it was a hardware play initially, but to Alex's point, has become like a medium content and community play. mean, I think the interesting thing about Peloton too, which most probably know this, like the first few years when John Foley was fundraising, I think he went to like 3,000 angels, 400 VCs, and talked about this smart bike and essentially got a no or failed. He did a Kickstarter, which wasn't successful because it looked overpriced. And it ended up having to raise like 10 million from I think 100 angels. So like a lot of VCs miss that because of maybe the, I guess, perception around hardware. And now it's a $35 billion public company. So quite a bit of success there. I think what we do look for is kind of like the opportunity for it to be a platform in which hardware serves as either a retention tool or an acquisition tool. But the real meat of the opportunity sits kind of with software, content, community, et cetera. Shout out to a portfolio company of ours called the Sensei, which actually, two of the founders are products of the University of Edinburgh. Spent a lot of time with various companies here, and actually now have like a handful of people still in Edinburgh and actually hiring, I think, across engineering and growth marketing, as they recently just put more capital in the coffers for their B2B approach. But they're doing something as well across kind of like a hardware software platform, but kind of their secret sauce rests in the software technology more so kind of in the hardware or smart apparel component. So I think it's just like hard with a venture firm early on assessing kind of hardware risk. And what you alluded to, Dak, kind of, it's tough to know kind of so early on, like how things look from a supply chain standpoint, how things look at scale in terms of unit economics, and just getting a feel for that. So I think it's a little bit easier to assess, a pure software platform in that regard and kind of how things evolve. But that maybe is the challenge. I think when we're typically assessing something, I think we do probably lean heavily on kind of the teams, like the founding team's background, to get comfort around what they're doing in the hardware space. And then typically we'll bring in like one or two advisors that maybe have some deep experience or have done it before or know a lot of people that can help us vet it. But I think it's a matter of really understanding kind of the technology behind it and kind of the process for bringing that to fruition at that early stage when things are so hard to tell from the beginning.
Fantastic. And you have a great answer on that, Lance. And to kind of bounce off that, David, so from what I understand, you're now in V3 for ShotScope, if that's right. Of course, I can only imagine the amount of kind of work gone into each version. What's your perspective on hardware?
Yeah, look, I am a hardware. Sorry, apologies, my kids are in the background running about the house. I am a hardware embedded software guy. That was my background. But I was very fortunate. I had a massive step up because I'd worked for a large corporate for a year as a digital design engineer. I then worked for this consultancy where I was running projects start to finish with regards, managing the people who come to us, asking for the design to be done, how to build a scalable design, get the partnerships, find the manufacturers, and actually put a solution together that would allow them to go and take it into a commercial product. So I had a lot of experience before I started ShotScope in the hardware embedded software area, and actually to learn the software area, because what Alex and Lance said, they're absolutely spot on. Nowadays hardware is a bit an enabler to the software platform and potentially the data behind it. And I think all smart products out there, if it's a technology-driven piece of hardware, if it's a physical product that's driven by smart technology and IoT, then there's a lot of software, there's a lot of data. It all comes together. So you're almost running a software business in parallel with a hardware business and all the pains that come from that. And then we actually built a very unique piece of custom electronics that totally messed with how you would normally build a GPS watch. Our RFID technology that's, this is in the public domain, you can find out is embedded in the strap and is the full length of the strap. That in itself, the manufacturing process around just getting the the flexible antenna into the overmolded strap is actually it could be patented, but we don't put it in the public domain. And then the driving circuitry for that actually takes up about 35% of the board. So all of a sudden, you've got some massive R&D challenges, and thankfully my CTO, my electronics design engineer Lewis, is actually a better engineer than me and managed to build a commercial product. But the V1 was effectively the step in. It verified to investors that there was a bit of a product market fit, but it didn't do very well. The V2 sold 40,000 units, but in the space of 2 years, sort of helped us get in the door on a lot of retailers, distributors, start to get a bit of a brand in the UK golf industry. And really our V3 product is flying, and it's really flying in the UK, and we now need to go and be a global brand. But what we're now learning is that, and we knew this 2 years ago, is that it's much about once you've got a brand, and once it's out there and it's doing pretty well, and 85% of our sales and users are in the UK, so we've got a lot of innate growth. You have opportunities to really start scaling. So we actually deliberately designed hardware that can be reused. So our same electronic hardware that goes into the V3 goes into a G3 at a different price point, and it's actually a stripped back version of the V3. It'll go into a handheld, it'll go into laser. We've given ourselves so many opportunities, but it took us 4 years to develop the technology to that stage. And look, I've spoke to probably over 200 VCs, certainly spoke to 200 angels, and we're very lucky. We've had some good funding rounds through angels, Old College Capital, Edinburgh University, Scottish Investment Bank, and Equity Gap. But we have brought in an awful lot of individual angels as well. And we're only now at a stage where the VCs look at us and kind of have interest in us, but there's still a massive problem at times with the hardware. If our investment partner can't see the initial hardware play that leads to the larger software plays and the larger data plays, that's not the right partner for us. And that can be pretty tough to take, that rejection, that another failure to get on with on any given day. But hardware is a bit of a double-edged sword nowadays. If it's smart hardware, smart technology, it comes with a lot of software usually. And that is a difficult combo, but it comes back to your teams, your experience, your partners, your supply chain. We've got phenomenal partners in our supply chain that allow us to consign potentially up to 100,000 units worth of material, and we don't pay for that for 12 months. Even once we consume it, we get fabulous terms. So, you kind of have to do it bit by bit. That's taken us 5 years to be able to do those type of deals with certain people in our supply chain. But yeah, it's really tough, and it's can be tough raising funding for a hardware startup as well. But I mean, you've got 3 companies here in front of you that have raised finance, so that says it can be done.
Absolutely, David. And so glad to hear you mentioned obviously brand as well. That's something that will lead nicely into the next question. Both to yourself, Roy, so obviously PlayerData as well, I guess similar to the other two, really combining hardware and software. And yeah, how's that journey been? I can only imagine it's many twists and turns and definitely not easy, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, people don't lie when they say hardware is hard. But the thing that a lot of people haven't figured out yet is hardware doesn't actually have to be expensive. And that's what we learned really early on. Mainly because we had no money, and mainly because we were fresh off the bat of being cheap students. But the first time we entered the hardware space and we had some designs that we wanted to get made, we contacted a design firm and they quoted us £5,000 and 6 weeks to get it made. And as 2 poor students, we didn't have that kind of money to throw around to do that. So Hayden, my co-founder, and I, we sat down and we read a couple books, read a few articles on the internet, and we did it ourselves. We did it ourselves for £20 and assembled it with a literally on my kitchen hob in a pan to get the boards to reflow. And that's when we appreciated actually that you could do hardware lean. So the first thing that we did with the first angel check that we got was we went and we bought a lot of cheap equipment off Alibaba, So we bought a pick-and-place machine for about £8,000. We bought a reflow oven for about £1,000. We bought all the bits that meant that we didn't have to go to any outside supplier to build and prototype our hardware. And by buying those equipments, not only can you do it in-house, but you actually develop a really fine understanding of how things are made and how things are done, so that when you go to get it scaled up, you're saving a ton of time, because effectively what you've done is you built a mini manufacturing plant in your office. In my case, it was in my front room. And that allowed us, by having that hardware in-house, we were able to do design revisions. We were able to do weekly design revisions, so we could test a new design every week. And going back to the point of failure, it allowed us to fail quicker, and actually cheaply, and iterate very, very quickly to get to the final product and test new concepts very, very quickly.
Fantastic. Well, I've seen Stephen's actually just bounced off really nicely what you shared about your kind of unorthodox approach, and you're saying that for him, similar obviously of the hardware risk with VCs, and they're able to get around it by buying a ton of Texas Instrument dev kits, about $10 each, to reflash their firmware. So he said if anyone wants to buy a 400 Ti sensor tag, send him a message. But yeah, I think that illustrates the point.
Sorry to come in, but you know what's really interesting about that? That's how the big companies do it. The big companies get the valve boards; they just get them for free. So it's exactly the same. He's absolutely bang on. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. So in terms of my questions, I've got just one, possibly another quick fire after that, and we'll come to a few of the people in the audience. I see Alex has asked a great question. I'll come to you, Alex, first, actually, after this. Possibly Johnny, if you're still here as well. So coming back to this point about brand, which I know you'd alluded to, David, and speaking about how important it is, and I know obviously you'd mentioned, Alex, as well, about content. And one of the things I was eager to dive into, actually, was the fact that obviously you've all got a sporting background. To me, that suggests that you probably have a good understanding of messaging and how to kind of speak to your audience. So even just as a kind of quick question for the three founders, I'll follow up and answer with another question for you in a second. Do you feel that's been a big advantage for you three? So knowing your kind of sporting background, that's going to help with even finding product market fit. So I'll come to you, Alex, first for that one.
You do stray into the danger at that point of, you've got to be careful you don't think right, because you are an example of it. But I think certainly what it does do is it gives you quick access to where your customers lie. You can speak the link. So the biggest, I had a conversation with a physiotherapist at English National Ballet today when I was visiting them, and he's football background, and he talks about that. Like, he grew up writing, the script, and he didn't spend a lot of time watching, and understanding what they go through so that he can do his job better as a physiotherapist. Because if he can understand what the athletes have to do to perform, then the buying from them is going to be so much, less, because he doesn't talk like them, act like them, and behave like them, right? And it becomes really apparent really quickly. So I think what it does do is it enables you quicker access, because your networks, show your early customers to you, and it enables you to interact with your customers, which is a critical thing at that early stage as well, through every stage of your business.
Fantastic, great point there, Alex. And coming over to you, David, now. So what's your perspective?
Apologies, just taking a second to get off mute there. Okay. Yeah, look, definitely. I mean, I was the reason ShortScope started is I was a 16-handed. I'd done my taekwondo. I started to play football. Realised I was I never really do anything by half. So if I'm going to do a sport, I want to do it brilliantly. If I'm going to do business or start a company, I want to do it well. So, when I realised I wasn't going to be an international footballer, I was like, right, next, what are we doing now? And decided I thought I could be a golfer. I started with a 16 handicap, got it down to 5 within about 18 months. And that was through gathering all this data and being a really frustrated golfer. But I just lived the market. I was down in the golf range for 3 hours every night. I was in the pro shop. I was reading articles. I was going getting lessons. I was talking to other golfers about their. I could tell golfers when I was playing competitions on a Sunday in my mid to late 20s more about their equipment than they knew themselves. They just bought it, and I just turned into an absolute golf geek. And I think it's healthy. And when you go to start the business, I think that's really healthy because you've got this underlying knowledge that's really useful. But see, as the business grows, it can actually become a little bit dangerous because you can't build a product for yourself. That can be the catalyst. Solving that initial problem was definitely the catalyst for ShotScope. But once we started to build a team, I really encouraged the guys to go and talk to people, and it's amazing. We've got guys that are amazing communicators. But asking them to go and talk to the market and actually go to the range or go to the golf course, and I actually still do it myself a lot. When I can get the chance, I'll go and talk to the market and camp out at the range or camp out at the pro shop and be this strange character tapping people on the shoulders when I was allowed to. One of the ways that I decided to quit my job to actually go and do ShotScope is we got a little bit of initial funding through a competition. And I was sitting thinking, I've left engineering to be a high school teacher. I'm now going to leave being a high school teacher to go and do this startup. And I was 30 at the time. And, my wife's wanting to have a family and things like this. And I took 1,000 questionnaires and hit the golf range and hit the first tee on a Saturday morning. And actually, believe it or not, we got 800 filled in. And that told me I should go and build this product. And, I've encouraged that in the team. And, it's a scary thing that you go and talk to your market. They might tell you it's rubbish, but you need to get out there, It allows you to get that data quick. It allows you to build a better product. And we do a lot of getting our users in and doing, even before COVID, we're doing a lot of remote things with our users or getting them into the office and asking for feedback. We run a user group, which is, when we first put it up, it was very scary, but it's phenomenal, the engagement on it now, and it really helps. But and if you don't know about the market, then and you've got an idea, it's really on you as the person that's going to try and build a company around that to go and investigate that. And I read there's a Scottish guy called Andy Mooney, who was the CEO of Fender Guitars, and I think he was in the executive team at Disney. And he was the company he worked for, or he got the license agreement for Nike way back in the 70s or 60s or something ridiculous.
Wow. And
he didn't have a clue. He was trying to sell these training shoes to sports people. And what he did is he started to hang around. He found that little communities in London were buying it. So he actually, these weekends, went and camped out, whether it be at the training ground or the community that was actually into rap. That was one of his biggest customers in the first place. And he went and learned why the customers were buying it. And that's so critical. If you don't know that, you're in trouble. You need to get under the skin of the consumer, and it's a difficult thing to do. But I encourage the team to go and do it at every opportunity. And we're about to scale up into America, and we're already sitting thinking how are we going to go to events, how are we going to have a presence there. And the presence there, yes, it's as much about getting relationships, getting routes to market, getting sales. We can actually do a lot of that remotely. A lot of the big corporates that we're already in with there, the large retailers, they don't really want to see you rock up at their door, but we still go and visit them. If you go to all these shows, it's not almost about selling products, it's about finding where your product sits in the market. So it's something you just need to spend that time.
Fantastic, excellently put. And I'll come to you, Roy, just now, and then quickly, Lance, I've got another question for you, and then we'll hop into some Q&A.
Like I said, I had a different journey into sports, and it was very clear early on that developing the product for my passion at the time, archery, was just a no-go. I probably knew. I probably had everybody who could afford the product in my phone book. So there's no market there. The thing that I did get from my time as being an athlete was an understanding for the underlying passion and drive, and of athletes. And the saddest thing that I had to really go through was I met so many people through my journey who had the same amount of drive as I did, and sometimes more, but never made it because of money.
Mm.
And so that's why we founded PlayerData, is to make sure that everybody can have an equal opportunity and it levels the playing field. The way that we approach product market fit PlayerData is really listening, going to listen to people's problems, because if you actually go to talk to a football coach and ask them what they want, what product they want, they'll tell you all sorts of things. But if you actually go and listen and watch the problems, what you can do is you can take elements that from other experiences, like experience of hardware, sensor capabilities, data capabilities, machine learning capabilities, and you can build a picture in your head of going, okay, well, this is a problem that this person has. You could solve it this many ways, and by having a high-level overview of the entire problem space and all the ways that you could solve it, you're able to innovate a lot quicker. And that's sort of where we kind of put the experience in PlayerData where it's needed. And my job on a daily basis is to look at that overview and make sure that the picture sort of aligns with what the company's vision.
Fantastic. Another excellent answer. I appreciate that. So Lance, I've got a very quick fire question for you, so I'm going to conscious of time with a bit Q&A. So obviously, of course, slightly different perspective from the kind of investor angle, but what for you is the number one trend or future development that you're most excited about when it comes to sports tech? Like, what jumps out for you as a exciting thing to look forward to?
Yeah, I might give you more than one just to hedge my bets. But one quick thing on Roy, like I think what Roy said was awesome. Like actually, the guys at a Sensei, I've been humbled multiple times where I'm like, hey, the user is saying that he or she wants this, and they're like, yeah, but if you watch the way that they actually use the product, they want something different. So I think the point about observing and watching and like almost like figuring out what the user wants is actually a great insight beyond just like asking them what they want. So like kudos to that. I mean, I believe that a lot now, and I have a lot to owe to the Sensei team for educating me there. I think like trends, I mean, I don't think any of these are going to be new to most people here. I mean, I think the pandemic accelerated a lot of this, but sports betting and media integration, I think it's going to be huge. You saw that with Penn National and Barstool and various other acquisitions where sports betting companies are also becoming media companies. And I think that's going to be a new form of fan engagement. I also think like gaming and game design and game mechanics are just penetrating everything, including sports, including health and wellness. And I think you'll see more and more of that where everything has some sort of game element or the underlying aspects of that to make the experience better. And that may be in the form of like, in sports, a lot of people come for the community and social experience. It's the same thing in gaming. And now you're seeing that in health and wellness where people are building like a community aspect to a fitness experience or something like that. And then lastly, John, the use of data, let's say in health and wellness, I think is allowing or is giving the opportunity for people to have access to things that elite athletes had in the past, right? Like, so I think everything from sleep, nutrition, exercise, mental health, a lot of that now in the future is going to become table stakes for the everyday consumer as they go through their day-to-day life. So I had to hedge my bets with a few. Those are kind of things that I'm looking at.
Fantastic, lads. No, I appreciate that. I knew obviously such a fast-growing, exciting industry, inevitable to be kind of many different areas. I want to take just a moment to say a huge thanks to all four of you. I knew it'd be such a lively and exciting conversation, and of course for making the time. Conscious of time, of course, but I'm keen for maybe one or two Q&A questions if that's okay with you guys. I know you may need to dash off, so if you do, obviously no problem at all. But I'll come very quickly over to Alex, because you had a really good question that I'll hand over to him in just a second. So virtual microphone is incoming. I'm going to chuck it over to you, Alex. So hope you're ready to catch it and I'll let you ask you a question.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
All good.
Fantastic, excellent. Hey guys, thanks. It's a very insightful conversation overall, lots of learnings. So I'm also in the sports tech space, and we're just at the point now where we're raising capital, but there's obviously quite a heavy bent in the VC industry overall towards particularly, SaaS. I'm sure everyone here has been through the problem of trying to find the right angels and the right VCs to get in front of in the first place. So I was just wondering how you went through that process, and if there's any kind of hacks as to finding the best ways to find yourselves in the most appropriate rooms.
That's a great question there, Alex. Let's go in order then. So I'll come to you, Alex, first, and then we'll David and Roy, and see what you think.
Sure. So our initial very, very small money came from, first round that we did. To be honest, where we got some of our angel money was from customers. So Jamie Murray, the tennis player, is one of our investors. He is a user of the product, right? He used the right thing, getting more athletes to invest in the routes we're going down. And then secondly, I went through an accelerator in the healthcare space, and the people who run the accelerator led our investment down. So that was really where our came from. And then, I had money with that, and especially the name of Jamie Murray, given that, we're initially in the sports space before going into the health and the medical space. That really helped just with sort of angels in general. And then it's into networking, talking to people, asking for introductions, going to networking events, building out. And investors typically know their investors, especially angels.
Fantastic. And what about yourself, David?
Yeah, similar to Alex. What I would say is, the amazing resource now. You can go on, you can start to look at, you can go VCs, top VCs in the UK, VCs in Scotland, angel investment groups in Scotland, and your Google search, and you can go on their website, look at their portfolio. So if you can look at their portfolio, you can start to get a feel for the type of companies they invest in, try and find those hardware-focused companies, those product-focused companies, or if you see all SaaS companies, they'll probably also be pitching somewhere on the site that they only do SaaS or they only do software. So, look, in the early days, I would chase everybody. I would get on the plane, charge down to London, run around Glasgow, Edinburgh, trying to talk to everybody. And it was quite healthy because you got a little bit of practice before you found the ones that you could actually pitch to and present the business in the best light to the right people and get that fit. But it can be tough, and I think getting in front of people, talking to them, at the end of the day, a lot of these investors, and we've raised a lot of capital through angels as well as some funds as well. And my gut instinct is they still invest in the people that are involved and the person that comes to sit in front of them as much as the company. So I think if you can get in front of them, and I know, look, it's impossible now, right? And Zoom and Teams and things like that, sometimes people still aren't conveyed in their best light. You missed a little bit of rapport building around the call at times if people are just busy on calls. And VCs are busy. But the trick I used is once I found a way in and maybe found them on LinkedIn or through another friend or contact or somebody I'd already built a network with, got an introduction into them, I would just offer to buy them a coffee. And what I found is it's really hard for people to turn down a coffee. When you say, love to take you for coffee, most of the time I've managed to go for a coffee with the person I've been trying to talk to. And I would encourage, when we can, to get out, if you're really at that early sort of raw stage of raising finance, talk to angels, talk to VCs that you might not work with for another 5 years, because you start to build a relationship. And you just need to be careful. If you see a VC and they don't invest in a company until the turnover's 5 million, you don't really want to ask that person for capital. You want to contact them and say, I'd love to buy a coffee, or I'd love to have half an hour of your time just to talk about my startup, let you know what we're doing, and have that relationship for when we want to work with you and and hopefully invest in us. I'm not looking for capital now. But if you're at that raw early stage, the angel groups in Scotland are phenomenal. There's angel groups all around the UK now, and obviously they invest for EIS and SEIS. So that's something to be aware of, because that's a big asset, a big win for a founder. And a lot of angels invest, solely for that reason and try and find good companies. And you can find your own angels, which can be tough. But once you've got a network of a few angels, you can ask them to open up their. If they're willing to invest in you. So what I did in the first round is we had 2 or 3 individual angels putting quite decent ticket sizes for a first round. And I basically said, if you've got any other contacts I can go and talk to when we start to do the next round. And, the 3-4 people there opened up their book to another 3-4 people, and were comfortable with it. And I guess the other one is, if you can find a really good chair or a really good person on your board, or somebody that's going to be an advisor to you and the company, and maybe either grow into a board position or a chair position, that person's probably got a black book as well that you can leverage. If they're going to trust you enough to come in as the chair, they're going to want to see you do well. So they should be willing to sort of do the roadshow with you and introduce you to people. So a whole host of things. But look, it comes back to that failure thing. It's determination, it's attitude, it's we're still getting no's when it comes to raising capital, and you just have to take that in the chin and go to the next one and try and find the best fit before you walk in the door. Fantastic. I don't know if I've answered that very well at all there, Beck. Apologies.
No, I think I honestly answered it perfectly, and I'm so glad we can come back to failure again. I think quite a big theme this evening, and a very important one, obviously, and like you're saying, being proactive. Very important. And what about yourself? I mean, obviously you've got had some big news recently, kind of Series A. What's your perspective on this?
I think the 2 best pieces of advice I could give you is, the first one is, you need to understand how VCs work, and you need to understand the VC business model. Because once you understand that, you can go in and you'll understand that sometimes the fund, the maths, the way the fund works and the maths behind that fund mean that you're at the wrong stage or you're in the wrong space for that to be a fit. And it's nothing personal. The second thing, I really echo David's sentiment here, is that once you understand that, you can go in with a different angle with, you're interested to meet people, you're interested to tell your story, you're interested to network within the network. And you just have to go and tell your story, meet as many people as possible, because you will find the right fit where everything lines up. And the way I found my first investor was, I was invited to a networking event about HR that I didn't really want to go to, but I forced myself to go. I went, I spoke to people, and on the way out, I was in an elevator with one of the speakers, and in the 20 seconds I had an elevator, I just told them, roughly what I did. He gave me his card, and then we said goodbye, but the next week I got an email going, "Hey, pleasure, nice to meet you. Can you come in? Can we have a coffee?" So you'll never know, in whatever situation, who you'll meet. And the best way to play the numbers game is to go meet as many people as possible.
Fantastic. I love that story as well, boy. It just shows you putting yourself out there, of course, and making your own luck as well, potentially in sometimes. So I'll come to you, Lance, actually, just to kind of wrap things up. So I know, obviously, it's quite nice, actually, to hear from VC side of things. What advice would you give to kind of founders in a similar way, how to get your foot in the door and how to kind of really go about meeting VCs in the best possible way?
Yeah, I think the wild thing about the venture space, which has already been alluded to, is that everyone has a different view and does things differently. So there is somebody out there that is going to be interested in what you're building. It's a matter of finding them and like having a compelling story, which I think takes, for right or wrong, takes a lot of work up front to figure out who you should be reaching out to and spending your time doing that and kind of making it an attractive opportunity for the VC. Like, knowing what they've invested in the past, kind of what their what the types of things are that they like to see in an opportunity, I think is super helpful. It's a bit more work up front, but probably saves you a lot of time on the back end. And then it's just like as many people as you can getting in front of them. I do think, especially at the early stage, most VCs are focused on the team more so than anything else in some form or fashion. And so there is this human element of getting to know someone and wanting to back that person for things that maybe don't come across in a deck. And it's a matter of things you learn about them outside of just what's in a deck or what's in an email. And I would say, like, investors, myself included, I think it's very humbling, like, get things wrong all the time. More so than they do right most of the time. So I think it is just realizing that kind of you're going to hear a lot of no's, and it's just a matter of like finding the right person, talking to enough people, and I would say like using kind of the resources across the founder community that have been successful to get their feedback is a great way as well. So probably no nuggets of wisdom there, but hopefully that's helpful.
No, quite the opposite answer. No, that was very helpful indeed. So eager to hear your perspective. And so conscious time, like I said, really appreciate all four of you making the time this evening. And obviously, thank you for joining on this first outing on Roomkey. A bit of a trial run, bit of an exciting test. So with that said, really appreciate everyone attending as well. I'm going to use the kind of clap feature now just to show my appreciation as well.